Spiritual possession, or demonic possession. Is there really a difference between the two? Well, the first simply takes over a human body and controls it. The latter implies something more dangerous, more threatening. But is it safe to say that either way, when a spirit infiltrates your body and takes the driver's seat in your consciousness, it's already quite threatening? If you don't believe so, grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and let's listen to 3 of these possession stories. If it gets any worse, we'll have to call the priest. Unexplained possession? 2 years ago, I was on my bed, and my body was moving inadvertently. Something communicated with me through my body language. This is not a joke, and I wish to know exactly what I am dealing with. What happened? Back in early 2011, I was laying in my bed, fully awake, and my body started moving on its own. I could see through my eyes what was happening, and could verbally speak. My arms were shifting left and right, my foot was tapping, my fingers were tapping, my shoulders kind of shrugged. The body language seemed to communicate waiting. I had asked, "Is there anybody there?" Immediately my right hand clenched and gave me a thumbs up. Again, I was fully awake. I asked whatever it was about 100 times if it was demonic. I got a thumbs down each time. I had asked a bunch of yes or no questions, and if things were overly complex, I would get a sideways thumb for needs further explanation. Basically, I asked a lot of questions and I didn't always get a yes or no answer. This possession happened 2 other times. The second time it happened, I had a pen and paper, and it communicated with me that way. I had asked for it to prove itself, and it wrote down a Bible scripture. I went to my Bible and opened up the verse. I can't really remember which one it was, but the answer was always the same. I asked about 3 more times, claiming beginner's luck, that essentially, when God or its angels communicate with you, that you shouldn't be in fear, that you should listen. It was usually something along the lines about a deity communicating with a human. I remember in particular that there were things I needed to hold close to me, that everyone should know. Number 1, there is an afterlife. It's very broad to talk about, but essentially there are multiple layers to go where one may go. There are degrees of heaven and hell and not just 2 paths. Number 2, that coincidences are not always coincidental. Number 3, that you should be nice to everybody. Number 4, that everything does happen for a reason. Anyways, I have so much more to say about this, but I don't want to type up a jumbled and long post. If you have any questions, please ask me. I am still unsure of what exactly I am dealing with. It has mentioned it's kind of like my guardian angel. What to consider? Number 1, it was not sleep paralysis. I was fully awake at the time it happened. Number 2, no, I had not ingested an alcohol or drugs. Number 3, I do not have schizophrenia, but I do have a mild form of depression. Number 4, I have not visited any doctors, psychiatrists, or people of spiritualism or religion about it. And finally, there have been many coincidences as pointed out. I recall back then that my friend would always pick me up to drive to our other friend's house. It was a 2-minute drive. We stayed late and my friend joked about how our friend looked like a certain musician. That musician was on the radio station as soon as we left in that duration of 2 minutes. I would say that out of the 40 times we've been to his place, this particular musician was on the radio at the time about 25% of the time. Possession of my brother. It was December 2013. The city I live in, Jaipur, is a pretty developed city in the state of Rajasthan in India. We are a family of 4, me, my father, my mother, and my younger brother. For 15 years I've been staying away from home in residential schools and colleges, and my brother stays with my parents in Jaipur. After I completed my graduation, I came back to my hometown so I can start my career. When I arrived, my brother was already shifted to residential school to continue his 11th grade studies. He came back for holidays multiple times when I was there, but all was well until 1st of April 2013. I was sleeping with my brother in his room after watching a few movies. At around 2 a.m., I start hearing a growling sound, and when I wake up, I see my brother sitting on the bed beside me and growling. So I ask him what is wrong, and he did not reply. And I asked a couple more times, but they were in vain. That is when I lost my patience and shouted at him, holding his face towards me. But the response was not the kind of response I would have expected in my whole life. He kicked me on my chest, shouting, "How dare you touch a woman who is angry at a man?" Boom, I went and hit the cupboard and shouted so my mom and dad came to protection. But as soon as my mom walked in, he slapped her so hard that she fell on the floor, and when my dad came in, he kicked him, and he was also on the floor, not in a condition to get up. So I gathered myself up and caught hold of him and made him lay down on the floor, as I was an ex-sportsman and now a heavy guy with a lot of stamina. And I started screaming for help, and that is when neighbors came in running for help. There were many people in the room. We were finally able to control him and tie him down and throw him on the bed. Later we called in an old friend of my dad's who did all this black magic stuff, and when he walked in, he spent some time all alone with my tied up brother in the room and came back out to tell us exactly what happened. According to him, while my brother was in school, he went out on a weekend and came back to the area where his hostel was, situated at around 2 a.m. in the night. And while walking towards the hostel, my brother and his friends chose to go through the cemetery as a shortcut. But on the way, one of his friends challenged him to go and pray anything near any grave, and he did so, to a big grave where 2 family members, a mother and a daughter, were buried after they were killed by her husband because she had an affair with someone else. So the souls of these 2, mother and daughter, had possessed my brother back then and stayed in for the right time. Later, he was cured after a lot of praying, but is restricted from having any alcohol and meat. My mom still fears that the daughter hasn't left his body, but we do not feel the same anymore. I think my boyfriend is possessed. My boyfriend is a very calm, rational person. He used to have an alcohol problem and a drug problem, in which he turned to the Catholic Church to overcome. His mom and auntie are deeply into witchcraft and the occult, and a few months ago they asked him to join in on a Ouija board session. As soon as his finger touched the glass, his eyes turned to black, and the glass moved from yes to no, before his whole body started spasming, and the board flew across the room. Ever since, both his mom and auntie have outright refused to be alone with him. The energy they feel from him. Last night, I personally witnessed what I believe to be a demon inside him. We were talking about moving in together, getting our own place. He was calm and happy. Then all of a sudden, his eyes turned black, and he was breathing really heavily. It almost sounded statically, like when the TV's up on full blast on a no channel. He was making growling noises, saying things, none of it in English or language I could make sense of. He fell face down on the floor, and it looked like he was being strangled, gasping for air. He usually has a Catholic cross around his neck. At some point, this ended up across the room, the chain link broken. I didn't know what to do, and an instinct was to tell it to leave. It isn't welcome. My boyfriend looked at me and started laughing. A laugh I'd never heard before. It sounded like pure evil. And then he started growling again, words I could not understand. I kept yelling, "Leave!" And the laughing started again. This went on for 15 minutes. When he came out of it, he said his throat hurt and he started throwing up. I do not believe it was an act. I thought about going to a Catholic church asking for blessing today. I don't know where else to turn. I am now truly scared of what's within him. Any advice or opinions would be massively welcomed. We are both 24 and live in Australia.